Let me log in.
The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line.
Wow, man, it's 1 past 2 minutes already. It's just 1 o'clock.
Still checking the collections.
Huh? Really? Yeah. You know this company?
I know this company, of course. So famous.
Yeah. It's marketing stuff.
My friend is working in there.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Here?
In Singapore.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So, Eric? Yes. The audio is now live, though we're not starting quite yet. So everybody who can hear us, please hang on. We're going to be starting in just a moment. We have quite a few people who are logging in right now. We're up to 240 people on the line. We'll be starting in just a minute. Sounds good? Okay, Eric, I think we should probably begin. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. We're still have a lot of people coming online. We're up to, so far, almost 300 people coming to join this webinar, which shows a great deal of interest in the topic of Facebook in Asia. My name is Tom Crampton. I run social media for Asia Pacific at Ogilvy and Mather. This is the next in our series of webinars done with the Wall Street Journal Asia, the GoToMeeting, and Ogilvy. This is a series of sort of executive-style looks at social media, how you can use it in Asia, and what its value can be. And today we're very pleased to be joined by Eric Johnson, who's actually dialing in from Singapore. I am in Hong Kong. Eric, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
As with all of our webinars, we like to make them as interactive as possible. You can either send over tweets, or it seems like almost everybody prefers to use the platform. So let's generally stick with the platform. If you have a question, at any moment, please send in that question. Is there a hashtag? We already have questions coming in, which is great. Henry Talbot asks, is there a hashtag for this webinar? Yes, there is a hashtag for this webinar. It is FB Asia, as in Facebook Asia. Please use that hashtag, use it frequently. We'll be monitoring it. And use the meeting pane to ask your question. And just to make sure everybody is clear on how to use the meeting pane, please type in right now in the question box where you are dialing from. Where are you coming in? Where are you joining us from? And we're getting lots of answers. Manila, Hong Kong, Sydney, Kuala Lumpur, Jakarta, Singapore, Shanghai, Taiwan, India. Who's going to get our Vietnam, Hong Kong again. Israel, welcome Israel. Good morning, Israel. Bangkok, Sri Lanka, Melbourne, Sydney, San Diego. You get the award. Caroline Walker from San Diego gets the award for distance at this point. Bangalore, Denver. Brett Clement from Denver. Welcome on board. Atlanta. All right, Raghu, we have a new winner. Atlanta is dialing in. We've got Manila, Jordan, lots of other places. Jordan, wow, that's impressive. Stephen Chu down in Jordan. Great. Thank you very much for joining, everybody. We are going to be going through a quick agenda here. The intention is to make this, however, as interactive as possible. This is not about a one-way communication. As with all social media, this is about a dialogue and conversation. At any point, please put in the questions. We'll be going through first a look at some of the statistics about Facebook, just to sort of give a little bit of a background on that, and then I'll be handing it over to Eric to talk about some of the more specific things in relation to Facebook in Asia and some of the new changes that have come around. Of course, Facebook is an extremely large platform globally. If you look at Facebook itself, there are about 800 million people on the platform, 350 million of whom use Facebook's mobile functionalities or use it via their mobile. Interestingly, in almost every market where Facebook is the top social media platform or top social network, it is also the most downloaded iPhone app. This is shows the power of Facebook and the way that people like to connect on it. And of course, here in Asia, the apps have been a key part of the growth of Facebook, including such things as the way that Indonesia switched from Facebook, from Friendster over to Facebook, in large part due to the mobile apps, because everybody is stuck in Jakarta traffic. I don't know how many people from Jakarta are on the line, but I hope you made it and didn't get stuck in the traffic this morning. In terms of Asia itself, a more focused look at the situation in Asia, there is a huge portion of the Asian population using Facebook. And when I say Asian population, I don't mean just the online population. The graph on the bottom left shows the actual total population. If you look at every man, woman, and child in each one of those 10 markets, you can see that the penetration of the total population in Singapore and Hong Kong is greater than that of the United States. But even so, Australia, New Zealand, Taiwan, Malaysia, these are high levels of penetration of Facebook through all of these markets. When you look at the total online population on the top right, and I have to give a disclaimer on these statistics, these are not Facebook statistics, these are statistics that we have compiled, so any errors, omissions, etc., please blame me. If you look at Indonesia, 132% of the online population is on Facebook. How can that be? That's because these statistics were used compiling numbers that include the national statistics for the internet, the amount of people on the internet, and that number in Indonesia is done by the government and is not as up to date as the statistics on Facebook. So I'd say that you're near 95 to 100% penetration of Facebook for the online population in Indonesia. If you downgrade that for the way that Facebook can actually measure who is on Facebook faster than the government can measure who is on the internet. We have one question that came over just a moment ago from Corinne Strauss asking, do we get the slides afterwards? Yes, absolutely. All of these slides will be available. If you can put down your pencils, no need to take notes. We'll be making all of these available, and you can get them off of the blog, which is asiadigitalmap.com, the Ogilvy Digital blog. Now we have the timeline, which is one of the recent changes to Facebook. And I'll hand over the microphone here to Eric to talk a little bit about what the meaning of timeline is, what the intention is, and how we are, how people should think about it. So, Eric, over to you.
Great. Well, thanks, Tom, again for hosting this session today and allowing us to be a part of it. It's a great privilege to work with you and Ogilvy on this particular session. And I want to echo something that Tom said at the beginning, which is that this should be interactive. We have lots of different slides, and we can talk forever about what's exciting about Facebook and social media, but I think what makes this forum in particular particularly meaningful is the ability for people to ask questions and for us to respond. So I have 3 sections in this presentation today, talking about some of the new things that Facebook is rolling out. And the first 2 will really try to bring a consumer point of view in terms of what it means to be a user. And then we'll talk a little bit about what these 2 changes, timeline and ticker, mean for businesses and brands. I don't know if the people on the webinar today are mostly coming from their own small business, or they work at a big company or an agency, or are just curious as an end user, but we'll try to address a few of the different pivots on this to give you some perspective of where Facebook is headed. The slide that you're looking at now, the Facebook profile, this is what my profile page looks like today. And I'm assuming most of the people on the webinar are Facebook users, and you're familiar with this particular page. And it's been a great identity point in the internet. A lot of times when we're talking to people, we talk about how technology has evolved to move from email to messaging and then to Facebook. And the point there has been that the communications has changed. It's not simply just sending an email to somebody that matters. Really, where we're headed is a future where we have our identity on the internet. And that represents who we are, and it allows for more meaningful communication. So to give you an example, if you post a picture to your Facebook profile today, rather than someone just sending you an email saying, I saw that great picture, people can comment, and then other people can comment on top of that. You create a dialogue. And I think that's one of the things that makes social networking really powerful, is that it's not communication, it's sharing and storytelling. And that's really the direction that Facebook is headed. And so this profile page, as you see today, has been good. People spend more than 7 hours a month on Facebook, and I think it's a deep, engaging site. But we believe that more can be done. And so at the Facebook Developer Conference called F8 in October of this year, we announced Timeline. So if you look at the next slide, there we go. If you look at this slide, this is a picture of my timeline. And if you think about that page you saw a minute ago, it really is a 10 to 15 minute snapshot of my life. Timeline is my entire life portrayed on the internet, my point in the social graph. And I get to curate this. I get to control what content I put on this page. I can pick and choose what pictures I show, what videos I share. But this is a much richer experience. You can scroll back in time. If you look at the screenshot here, you'll see on the right it starts with now, and then goes back to October and September and August, and then it goes back in time. And as you fill out your timeline by adding photos or other things that have happened, you get a much, much richer profile of who you are. And the reason we're doing this, it's not just to create a place that people can post photos about themselves. What we've learned from looking at how people use Facebook and what they want is they want to continue to move from communication down the path towards storytelling. And what Timeline allows you to do is to highlight all of those connections to both people and things that are part of your story. So for example, I could go out and have lunch with a friend, and I could check in at that restaurant, and that event would be part of my timeline. Now that's interesting because I had an occurrence, I had a meeting with my friend, and so that's relevant to my friend and myself. But that restaurant is also part of my story. Maybe I went to a restaurant and had a really great tiramisu. That's not part of my life story. I had a really great tiramisu at this restaurant. But you can also see how that creates some opportunities for brands and for businesses. So Timeline is moving down that path of allowing me to post content about myself and also what I do. In short, it gives you really a more complete picture of who I am, what I enjoy, the movies I like to see, those kinds of things. So in summary, really, if you want to think about timeline, you can think about it as the essential people and the essential things that make each of us who we are. Now, let's take a look at the next slide. I mentioned brands, and brands are an important part of my timeline because it's an important part of who I am and how I'm leading my life. I think for a long time, when people think about social networking, they thought about having all my friends and the communications and the interactions I have with my friends. When we added check-ins, so you could check in from a location, we added location to that, so I could share I am at a specific point. I'm watching the sunset over the Golden Gate Bridge, for example. That would be something that's relevant and interesting. And we realized in doing that people also have experiences with brands and with companies and with services and with products. And that in order to really make your story interesting and representative, you have to include that as well. So one of the key things from an end user point of view, this isn't the business side, this is really from an end user point of view, that Timeline enables is a much richer history of how I've interacted with different brands and companies. So I'm trying hard not to pick a specific company on this because I want to be completely open-minded and agnostic. But let's say, for example, I really like coffee. And so there's a coffee chain from my hometown in Seattle that's quite popular. And if I check in at that coffee shop, when I visit their stores around the world, that's part of my story and who I am. I like to drink coffee. I like to experience coffee in different cities around the world, and I happen to like this one particular chain. That says something about me. That's part of the story that I'm trying to tell to all of my friends and all of my friends of friends so they get to know a little bit about me. So as you can see, what Timeline allows you to do is to go a lot deeper, both with consumers, with your friends, but also with brands, and it allows brands to have a deeper conversation with consumers as well. Now let's talk a little bit about Ticker. Next slide, please.
Okay, well, hang on, actually, Eric. We've got a bunch of questions coming through.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Mitch Schneider, actually on Twitter, the hashtag FVAsia is actually extremely live. We've had, 40 or 50 tweets already. One of them was from Mitch Schneider asking, when will the timeline be open to everyone?
That will happen in the next 2 weeks, let's say. Early December is our current target. People are probably wondering, gosh, you announced it in October, what's taking so long? And we've done a lot of work to make sure that we roll this out in a responsible way. So we've been testing it with different groups of people. The screenshots that you saw here today are largely representative of what the final product will look like. And I expect for sure by the end of the year, but most likely in the next couple of weeks, we'll start rolling this out to different markets.
Okay, we actually had another question, Allison Liu, which went back to the earlier part of statistics. Can you explain why South Korea's penetration of Facebook is so low?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I don't think there's any one simple answer to it. One thing that we have heard that across North Asia is that there's a bit of an aversion to real name services. And again, people may have different responses to this, and there's probably other reasons. But one thing across Japan, Korea, and even China to some extent, there's been real name services have never been hugely successful. And Facebook is a real name, it's a real identity site. In order to use the service, you have to log in with your real name, and you obviously want to post real pictures and information around yourself. That's one thing. I think the second thing, too, is that there have been really strong social companies operating in that market for some time, largely around gaming, but there has been more, say, competition as it relates to people using social-type services in that market than we see in some others. But Korea has actually been growing quite strongly over the last year. Our number of users in that market has grown almost 100% over the last 12 months. And so we think that perhaps real name services are starting to pick up and take on a little bit more popularity in that market as well.
Okay, so in other words, it's coming soon to Korea, is your take, but the real name services, struggle with real name services, which actually I agree with that assessment. If you look at Japan, some of the more popular social networks are very much interest-centric rather than people-centric. There's been this cases of the community degree, and at least we see it going forward, whether that move towards real name takes off, particularly in these markets in North Asia. There are also some questions. Vivek Goel is asking, does Timeline apply to online brands as well?
It will, is the short answer to that question. In terms of how we roll this out, I think we want to roll it out to end users first to make sure that people get used to the functionality, and that we will continue to tweak and innovate on top of that based on feedback in terms of how we use it. I think that's important before we roll it out broadly to brands, but we will roll out timeline for brands in the near future.
Okay, and I guess we'll be speaking a little bit more about that as we get further on in the webinar. There's about 5 questions. Will timeline apply to business pages? How will timeline work on a Facebook page? So is it, there's going to be a special format that you'll be launching for brands, or?
Yeah, so in terms of that question, what we'll talk a little bit more about in the webinar is how brands can use timeline as it's rolled out for users to make their brands part of everyone's story. That will be available when we roll timeline out. And that already happens today to some degree, even with the current profile page. I can check in from a restaurant. I can I can write a post about a great cup of coffee I had or a great movie I saw. And also, if I'm friends of pages, those pages can also post in my profile today. So that already happens. What timeline enables is for you to go back in time and really see how you've interacted with a specific product, or brand, or service over a longer period of time. So it becomes more of a narrative and a story and less of kind of a one-time thing. That we will be doing, that'll happen right away. The question around timeline specifically for brands, I think we need to learn a little bit more about how it works with consumers, and we'll figure out the best way to roll that out.
Okay, great question coming in from Henry Talbot. He's asking, he's wondering what timeline will look like on Facebook's mobile app.
Yeah, so that one too, we will probably be making some announcements around that in the spring. But I think the most important thing to remember is the concept of timeline around allowing people to scroll backwards and see an extended, a deeper profile of who somebody is. We will keep those characteristics alive in the mobile timeline. The thing we have to be aware of course, is that there are millions of mobile devices out there and hundreds of thousands of different types of form factors. Maybe not hundreds of thousands. There's thousands of different form factors. And so you want to make sure the timeline works on as many of them as possible. And so that requires some tweaking and innovation. I would say it'll look very similar to what you see on the PC, but I don't want to discuss the specific look and feel because it will vary depending on what type of phone you have.
Okay, great. One more timeline. The timeline questions just keep coming in. We've had hundreds of questions by now. I'm just trying to sort through them all. We have a question from Daniel Downs in Australia. You said it will come out in spring. I guess he's from Australia. He says, whose spring? I presume we're talking about the Northern Hemisphere spring.
That is a good point. Yes.
The timeline, there's a question about timeline. Will it be used for pages or groups? This is from Oscar Franzenthala.
Will timeline be used for pages or groups? Yeah, I would say on that one that we always seek to have the most innovative page design out there. And as I mentioned before, timeline is something new. We've announced that it's coming to end users, and we're talking a little bit about that today. In terms of exactly how we use some of that functionality and also some of the kind of design components of that on things like pages is something we need to tweak in the future. So what I would say, and I'm trying not to give you a fluffy, evasive answer, we really are committed to the idea that sharing more of your information is better, and you control that experience. That's what timeline is about. When you think about what that means for a brand or a page, it's a slightly different experience. And we want to make sure we've got it right for the end users first before we really roll it out with brands. And that would be on pages or groups. So the answer is at some point, we will likely be doing redesigns to those elements. But exactly how it will look and how much of the timeline features will be in there, I can't really comment on today.
Okay, excellent. Let's move on to the ticker.
Okay.
What is the ticker?
So the ticker, this is the other thing that probably most people who are using Facebook have experienced this already. And I wanted to stop for a minute and give you a quick background in terms of why we rolled ticker out. I will be honest with everyone on this webinar. When we rolled ticker out, we got a lot of different feedback. Some people loved it, some people thought it was okay, and some people didn't like it at all. And I think the key reason why people had different reactions is that it depends a little bit on how you use Facebook. And so I'm starting with these numbers. If you look at the 2 billion posts liked and commented on every day, 500 million users log in, 225 to 250 million photos are uploaded every day. These are big numbers. And Mark Zuckerberg likes to talk a lot about how human beings have a hard time understanding the notion of compounding. He'll tell you a story. He'll say, if you tell somebody, I double something every day for a week, what do you think you get at the end? And most people will say, I don't know, 4 times as much. And the answer is you get 64 times as much. Exponential growth is hard for humans to comprehend, but anyone who's on Facebook and realizes how much information is coming in from their friends realizes that, in fact, there is a lot more data going around. And what we were trying to solve for with Ticker was to say, how can you stay on top of all of that information without having it overwhelm you? That was really the idea behind it, was to say, let's summarize some things that can be shortened to a sentence, some likes, for example, or when people are using an application. Let's put some of that over in timeline. So that was the motivation behind it. And if you move to the next slide, we'll take a look at what it looks like. So here you can see exactly what I'm talking about, and this is a copy of a timeline of screenshot of someone's timeline from here in the office. And what you see is a bunch of content that's really interesting. It's important to know who likes what, who's tagging what, but we really want to focus the newsfeed on the storytelling aspects of it, and especially when we roll out timeline, that will become even more important. And as we thought about the best way to do this from a UI point of view, we built this ticker. If you go to the next slide, I'll give you some more concrete examples of how events can drive usage in the ticker. So if you look here, the ticker was launched to both summarize things that were overwhelming people's news feeds, but also provide a place for applications that are generating lots of content to get that information out. So what I mean by that is, in this particular example, we have two apps. One is Spotify, and one is FoodSpotting. And on something like Spotify, if I'm listening to a song, that may be very, very relevant to a number of different people. But I don't want to overwhelm their newsfeed with this. I just want to have a simple line in the ticker that says that Eric Johnson is listening to, I don't know, Unforgettable Fire by U2. And someone would look at that and say, well, that's interesting. I actually really like that album. I wonder what song he's listening to. And go and click and listen to that. Or maybe they're going to send me maybe it's one of my friends from earlier in my life who will say, oh, I remember listening to that song, and that'll actually generate some content in the news feed. The point is, you don't want to overwhelm people with that information, but you want to make it available. And we've actually seen that this has worked quite well. Spotify has gone to 4 million users. When I say quite well, I'm not talking about the business performance, about the 4 million. I'm talking about the fact that a lot of people seem interested in sharing what they're listening to and learning what other people are listening to as well. So the ticker really enables that. I'm going to talk in the next section some more around how businesses can use this and give you the business side. But from a consumer point of view, think of it in terms of there are lots of little things that happen every day that I'm interested in knowing about. And that's what's captured in ticker. And there's a lot of storytelling going on where people are posting more detailed information or uploading photos or videos that I want to actually read and digest and comment on and have a community kind of point of view on. That's what will show up in my newsfeed. And that was the rationale for really, to some degree, splitting the site into 2 sections where we comment and use the real estate in different ways to share information. So I'll stop and take questions on ticker before we get into the business side of things.
Yes, and we've got a huge number of questions on ticker, both coming over the highly active FB Asia hashtag on Twitter and on the platform. One came over very early from Danish Ijaz. He might be our person joining us from Israel, I can't remember. Which he just makes a comment, which he says he finds the ticker the most annoying factor of Facebook. He then goes on to say, is there an issue about privacy with this? Is there a way to control the ticker? Is there a way to have any influence over what comes onto my ticker in particular?
Yeah, so the answer there is you have control over what you share. You have less control over what people share with you. So the answer is yes and no to that specific question. And I think that that feedback is feedback we've heard from different people as well. I think the interesting thing is when we discuss this in depth with users and say, but would you want to have all this content showing up in your newsfeed all the time, especially as the pace of sharing continues to grow exponentially? People actually take a step back and say, okay, I understand what you're trying to do. And I think that we're in this situation where sharing is new. The amount of sharing is something that people are just experiencing for the first time. And we're in the middle of this too. We're trying to learn as we go and figure out the best way to present as much information to people as possible without overwhelming them. If you overwhelm people, then there's no longer a dialogue. There's no sharing. Then it's just information. And that was my earlier comment. That's really what email is about. This is supposed to be community building. And so the idea is that the ticker just prompts conversations rather than actually is the conversation. And that's why we did it the way we did it. And I think for that, it actually is a reasonably good way to kind of split the conversation into something that starts it and something that is the deeper, more community-focused conversation you would have in a newsfeed.
Okay, great. And we've got a question related to that coming in from Hong Kong. Kevin on in Hong Kong. How does Facebook determine what goes where, whether it goes in the ticker or in the newsfeed?
Yeah, I think the rules are more or less like what I just described, which is something that is kind of a one-time event. So, for example, if I use the Washington Post Reader application and read a story, that will show up in my ticker because I just read something. That's short and simple. Now, interestingly enough, if a whole bunch of people who are friends of mine read that same story, that may be something that's more conversational. So that gets summarized and that shows up in my newsfeed. So, for example, maybe someone read a story about, I don't know, something that's happening in the United States debt crisis. Okay, not a positive example, but something that a lot of people are reading about right now. If one person read that, that would be in the ticker. But if half my friends read about it, then maybe that's something substantive and something that we want to have a dialogue and a conversation about. Same is true if I like something. If I just go and like a particular brand, that will show up in the ticker because that's a one-time occurrence. But if a whole bunch of people go and like something, that may be summarized into a newsfeed item as well. And so again, it's kind of like I was saying, we really want to get the ticker to be a source of information that you don't want to miss out on, that hopefully will drive other conversations. But also it's not something that you necessarily need to respond to. You're not going to respond to every like. You're not going to respond to every time somebody goes and listens to a song on Spotify or watches a movie on Netflix or reads some content on Yahoo. You're not going to do that. And so the answer is, one is really to get something going, and the other is the place where you actually do the deeper interaction.
Okay, which I think sort of is a question that is sort of put towards answers the question from Bucha Tan, which is asking, if I click on something in the ticker, does it in future always appear in my newsfeed? What you're saying is sort of that depends. It might if you click on it many times or not.
Yeah, that's right. Just simply clicking on something in a ticker doesn't really do much, to be honest with you. And it has more to do around how many people are reacting to something and whether it's more conversational or kind of just an element in time event.
Right, okay. We have another question that can brands sign up to have ticker and not just a page?
A ticker is not something that you can sign up for. What the ticker does is if you build an application, for example, and you're a brand, you can use that application to drive, to push updates out to the ticker. That you can do. But really, for the most part, the ticker is just an automatic tool that summarizes certain levels of conversation. It's not something that you need to go out and really think about specifically when you're building your page. I think the most important thing to think about when you're building your page is how you're going to get people to tell stories around it. And a ticker could be an element of that. Advertising can be an element of that. And you also can post videos and share photos and things that maybe are more substantive and conversational, and those will show up in your newsfeed. And we're getting into a little bit of detail. I'd be happy to, if your local Facebook person can answer those types of questions, we can get back to you individually on how exactly you do what you just described. But at the end of the day, it's just two different ways of communicating that lead to one common result, which is a dialogue around either what you're doing or, to your point on brands, what the brands are doing.
Okay, excellent. Let's move on to the next section, which is going to be looking at Facebook and business. And for this, we're actually going to do a little bit of a poll. The question that's going to come up on your screen in just a moment, don't answer in the question pane, it's going to be a poll, is whether you are using Facebook. Do you plan to use Facebook in the next 6 months for your business? Are you using it? Is this the first time you've used it, or have you used it previously, or you have no plans to use it? So let's start answering the question. We've got 20% of you have voted, up to a quarter of you have voted, a third of the audience has voted. Please vote quickly. We want to move on from this after we've got an indication of the experience people have on the line of using Facebook for business. Interestingly, we have a certain portion of people who are here but have no plans to use Facebook. Maybe they're consumers. The majority of you, it looks like, have used Facebook already for your business. Last chance to vote. Please click on one of the three. Yes, for the first time. Yes, you used it previously. Or no, you have no plans to use it. Okay. I will close the poll and share the results here. So as you can see, the vast majority of people on the line here have used Facebook previously for their business and do plan to use it again in the future. A smaller portion of you are planning to use it for the first time, and an even smaller portion have no plans to use it in the next 6 months. So, Eric, let's move on to the Facebook for Business and how we can learn from the new changes to Facebook, how that relates to brands and fans.
Okay. Part of the reason that we generally try to start any kind of narrative when we're talking to people about Facebook with the personal side or the user side is that really that's core to the mission for Facebook. Facebook's mission is about making the world a more open and connected place. And that includes communicating with your friends and relatives and family, but it also includes communicating with brands. And I think it's important because that is the context in which brands will operate. We are not simply a site that has ad inventory and goes and sells ads. That's not Mark Zuckerberg's vision. His vision is that this is a place for sharing and storytelling, and that includes individuals and it includes, brands and companies and products and services. Now, that said, I think it's a great place for brands to go and advertise. And I make that comment just to give you some context around how we approach advertising in general at Facebook. But that's also important if you're a brand. You have to keep that in mind yourself. It's hard to go and think about buying advertising on Facebook unless you think about what the social context is. So if you go to the next slide, Tom. Yeah. This gives you some example of what I'm talking about. We believe that both Timeline and Ticker will actually make for deeper connections. And there's a specific example we got here on this side around a movie studio. And so as a marketer, this new Timeline will give you more opportunities to personalize the experiences that you offer. You can target your ads and sponsored stories based on the activities people have shared from apps, so that could happen in the Ticker, and they've added that to their Ticker, and some of that shows up in your Timeline. So to give you the example we have on this page is you could be an entertainment company premiering a new movie. You could target all of the people who have added a video app to that Timeline and who are watching comedy shows. Now, if you think about that, as a marketer, that's a very, very powerful way to go and target. I'm targeting the people who have a video app who are likely to watch video. If you think about it from a storytelling point of view, the fact that I watched a video is part of my story. Now, remember I mentioned at the beginning that you can curate your Timeline. You control what is on there. So that doesn't mean every video you watch has to show up on there. You have control over what you share. But you may decide that you watched a really interesting video and you would want your friends to know that you watched that video because you thought they should watch it. Or maybe it said something about who you are. If you think about that from a brand point of view, that's the way you get people to build emotional connections with brands. And that's what people have been trying to do with advertising forever and are still doing it today. Timeline allows for something that's much deeper because it includes a story as part of it. Let's go to the next slide. Now, to make this work, you can't just use pages in Timeline. We believe that the experience will be even richer when you include social plugins and applications. So I mentioned already how somebody could go and build an application and that will drive information to a Ticker. We think about this in terms of looking at what people want to do and putting that information in front of people on Facebook. So let me give you an example. If you used Facebook before Timeline, you could go and you could control the nouns. You could say, I like bok choy. I like eating at this restaurant. You could say what you like to do. Actually, you couldn't say I like eating. You could say I like this restaurant. You could talk about nouns. And what we believe is important is we're missing out on the verbs. We're missing out on allowing people the opportunity to say what it is they really like to do. So with Timeline, to use the same example, you could go out and say, I am cooking bok choy. You could say, I am ordering food at this restaurant. And that provides a much, much richer environment to talk about your specific brand. Now, applications can actually pre-populate some of this because maybe you're using an application that shows movies. In that instance, the feed, what would show up is that I am watching a movie, or my friend is watching a movie. Or maybe I've decided I want to go download an application that tracks how far I'm running and allows me to check in on Facebook. So you can see that I am running in Golden Gate Park, or I ran in the Singapore Botanic Gardens. That information is really, really interesting because it tells not just what I like, it tells you what I'm doing. And again, if you think about a brand, people have to interact with brands. They consume products and media, they buy things, they sell things, they eat things. That is what people do with products and services. They enjoy things. And by enabling these verbs, you can have a much deeper discussion. So the like button is something we've had for a while. Marketers can add it to their site by copying and pasting a few lines of code. But with apps, marketers can now build an app experience that users can add to Timeline. And people can then seamlessly update their timeline with activity from that app without having to click on any additional buttons. So let's go to slide 21. Now, the other thing that happens when the content is posted to someone's timeline, as I just described, is that other people see it. And that's really important. Your most important influence circle is really your trusted community of friends. When you make a decision around where to go on vacation or what to buy, a lot of times you'll ask a friend for advice. And you can reach out and ask them directly. But what the new experiences we're talking about with apps and the timelines allow you to do is when people are interacting with something, you can see that in real time. And then more importantly, because it's put into context of someone's whole timeline, I can really see how that fits into what that person is doing. So for example, let's say I want to take a vacation and I ask somebody where I should go. And they say, oh, you should go book a flight to Tahiti. Okay, that's a good piece of information for me. Okay. What would be even more interesting for me is to talk to my friends who've been to Tahiti. You go back and look at their timeline and see what airline they booked their flight on, what hotel they stayed at, and then I can see the pictures from their trip to Tahiti. I can see what comments they were making about that trip. I can see what responses other people said. In short, I get a full exposure to what their entire trip was like. And if their trip was great, I'm more likely to go and interact with the brands that they used to go and book that trip. That is a much more personal and much more powerful way to get your brand in front of somebody than simply me calling up my friend and saying, hey, what airline should I book if I want to go to Tahiti next week? So that's what we say when we talk about how you make things social from the ground up. We say, make sure that everything you do will drive a conversation and make sure that conversation gets logged and make sure your friends can see it. That's really the power of what these new features that we're talking about, Timeline and Ticketer, will do for brands. So let's go to slide 22. Now, I want to talk just briefly about advertising, because everything I just mentioned there was talking about how you can use applications and how you can use content that you post on your page to drive a discussion. And at the end of the day, if you're a business and you're thinking about advertising on Facebook or working with Facebook, the ads is an important part of what you need to do. I was going to say it's almost the most important. It really isn't. You have to do it all. You have to have a good page that you interact with that has content. You've got to think about how to use social technology with plugins, because at the end of the day, Facebook is an important part of where you want to get your message out, but you may have a website as well, and you want to make sure you're plugged in. Or if you're, say, an e-commerce company, you want to make sure that you're using social plugins to drive as much content out of your own business into Facebook so people can see what you're doing. But the other thing you need to do is think about how you reach people who aren't fans of your page, or if people are fans of your brand, how you get them to understand what new things are coming. And so I was just going to use one example here. I don't want to make this a whole deep dive on Facebook advertising, which is this new ad we have called a premium page post ad. And what this allows you to do, if you go and post something on your page, a piece of content, you can make that post into an ad that appears on the homepage. So if you look at the example here, it's a little bit small, but here in this example, someone actually posted some content around Ben & Jerry's, and then that specific content shows up in the ad. it says that the following people really liked Ben & Jerry's, and then Ben & Jerry's can run an ad beneath it. And what that does is it takes the social context, people like this particular brand, this particular product, and allows Ben & Jerry's in this case to say, I'm going to run an ad alongside of that so people can see what it is I'm offering and maybe why people are interested in liking Ben & Jerry's to begin with. These types of ads are really good because if I'm not a fan of this page, I might look at this and say, wow, look at all these people who are friends or fans of Ben & Jerry's. Maybe I should go do that as well. I'm missing out on what's going on at Ben & Jerry's. If I am a fan of that page, I might see this ad and say, gosh, I had no idea there was a special going on. I better go take advantage of this. It's a very, very powerful ad in terms of being able to grow the number of people that you communicate with as friends, but also to really, to some degree, think and respond to what people are posting and take that content and make it part of the ad. So let's go to the last slide here, and then I'll stop and take questions on the business side of it. So the last thing is, and I'll just touch on this briefly, is what we call insights. And at the end of the day, everything I just described will drive data. The one thing I want to focus on specifically is, and this page here is an example of a specific page, and you can see in this screenshot, 474,000 people like this. These are the fans of this page. And you can see that 8,000, roughly 9,000 people are talking about it. Now, on any given day, all of your fans are not going to be talking about your page. We know that. But this gives you a really quick snapshot, just this one number, into how many people are actually engaging with the content you're putting up on your page. And this is the kind of thing, when you think about running advertising, you can take a look and say, well, I need to get that number up. I'm going to go buy some ads. Or you can look at it and say, well, the engagement's really good, but I need more fans. I should buy some ads. Or maybe you're going to look at it and say, wow, everything's going great. I must be doing an amazing job of curating my page. Maybe I won't buy some ads. We want to make sure you are empowered to make the best decisions around how many ads to buy and what types of ads to run. This is different than saying we're going to give you all kinds of data you can use to go and target your users. At the end of the day, what's the most important thing about a Facebook ad isn't the data, it's the social context around it. But you have to have some data to be able to make some decisions. So I'm going to stop now. I'm sure there's lots of questions and everything I just went through, and we'll take those.
Yes, we've got a huge number of questions coming in, Eric, actually, both over Twitter and over the webinar platform. I've just put up here a summary of the different parts we've just spoken about. In that section, we spoke, so far today, we've spoken about a lot of different topics. And these are ones that we can now take questions for. We have just about 10 minutes left, so we have to be quick questions. I'll take them as they come through. One of them coming in is about the future of the like button. This is coming from Charu Matro. What is the future of the like button?
Yeah, the like button is the way that you go and engage with something outside of Facebook. And it's an important part of the experience, so that is not going away. I think, what I was saying around you now have the ability to use verbs when you're describing what you're doing. That's really when you're engaging with something within Facebook, or you're using a social plugin. The like is important because it's the easiest way we know to take sites that are outside of Facebook and bring that content or bring those services or drive that connection between the outside ecosystem and Facebook. So we'll continue to use the like button to do that.
Okay, so that will be around. That's not disappearing.
That's right.
There's a number of questions
right.
coming in relation to Vivek Goel asks it, Vishnu Muleti asks it, a bunch of people are asking about e-commerce. Is there anything you can say about e-commerce and Facebook?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, almost for any question around advertising and brands on Facebook, you have to come back to Facebook's mission around making the world more open and connected. And with that as a mission statement, we work with e-commerce companies, and I think the timeline creates a very robust place for companies to have conversations with consumers. Clearly, buying things is an important part of that. And I think that there's a space in there for e-commerce companies to play. So if you bought something from a specific e-commerce provider, that could show up in my timeline, and that would be interesting for people because they would know what I bought and where I bought it. But Facebook, in terms of us partnering specifically with one or two e-commerce providers, I think our plan is to remain an open platform to as many people as possible. And we're really pushing things like social plugins and timeline to create that environment where e-commerce companies can use that as well as advertising to reach a broader audience.
Okay, great. And what about search and timelines? This is a question from Matt Tan. How would we know to search in a person's timeline regarding a specific topic? You may have mentioned Tahiti now, but how do I know if there's even a history of that in the timeline?
Yeah, I think today it's a good question, and I think that you're kind of getting at where some of this needs to go as more and more data piles up on the site. In the current implementation of Timeline, we're looking at this something that you will scroll through, and we're really trying to focus on things like nostalgia. So, for example, what is a more likely scenario is I know that my friend went to Tahiti because I would know that anyway, and I would know roughly when they went, and I would scroll and look for that. But you are right that I may not know that information, and the scenario today would be send them a question or a post and say, hey, when did you go to Tahiti again? I can't remember. We don't want to make this a database. That's not the idea. And so while search can be useful to find things, and I think that there probably will be some progress on that way, that's not really what we're trying to build. What we're really trying to build is something that's more akin to storytelling. And there are other mechanisms on the site. I can communicate with people. I can send them messages to get that information that I would need to then be able to find that information on Timeline.
Okay. There are a couple of a few questions coming in on advertising. Maybe we'll cover that quickly just as a group. And I apologize for everybody. Please keep sending in your questions. I'm trying to ask as many of them as possible, but we've got way more questions than we have time to answer. So I'm trying to gather them together. Keep sending in the questions. A couple of ad-based questions. Erwin Oliva asks, on premium ads, how much will people pay for it? Another question from Catherine Lynn is, what is the average click-through rate for a Facebook ad, or what would you consider a good click-through rate for a Facebook ad?
Yeah, I think on the click-through rates, that varies so much by market, it's kind of meaningless for me to talk about it, so I'm just going to not address that specific issue, but depending on where you are, there's probably a Facebook sales rep who could sit down and talk to you a little bit about click-through rates and how you'd make that work. Sorry, what was the first question, Tom?
So the click-through rate for ads, and also how much will you have to pay for a premium ad? And I guess, sorry, one thing I'd add, Eric, to what you're saying, in terms of Facebook ads, one thing that we've found in terms of Facebook ads is click-through rates can vary wildly even within a given market, especially as you tweak an ad and play around with it. And that's why when we're doing Facebook ads, we will often do a wide range of them and see which ones get the best reaction and the most interactivity. And from our perspective, it's often, sometimes you don't know why it happens, but one of the versions of it does, and it doesn't cost you any more to have 15 versions of an ad up instead of just one version. So by playing around, you can really have a huge impact on the click-through rate. So premium ads, how much are people going to have to pay for the premium ads?
Yeah, and again, unfortunately, the pricing varies a little bit by geography, but just so you understand, we do have both premium ads, and then we have what we call marketplace ads. And if you're a big company, you can buy those on your own, or you can use your agency, or you can even buy them direct yourself. A lot of small businesses buy them themselves. There is a premium price for the premium ad because it includes additional social context that we don't make available on the marketplace ad. And the main reason we do that is that if you really want to get the premium ad that I just showed you to work, you have to invest a certain amount of energy and effort in making your page really, really robust. And our experience has been that, at least to date, that's something that would be appealing to premium advertisers more. We always look at this and say, gosh, this ad now is, if you look historically over the last few years at Facebook, some ads have started out as premium. They're now available in Marketplace. We always look at the best way to make as many ads available to the people who will use them. I know this will be hard to believe because at the end of the day, we are a business, but really, the thing that matters most to Mark Zuckerberg is user experience. He fundamentally believes that advertising is part of what makes the site good because the ads have social context. And to that degree, we always think about how can we encourage people to use as much social context as possible. That's really the motivating factor for the types of ads we build and how we price them.
Okay, a couple of grouping together another few of these questions. They're still pouring in, and keep sending them. Eugenia Co asks, and this is sort of more the uses of Facebook and where its relevance is. How do you see Facebook being used for industries such as private banking, where it's less about mass reach and it's more about exclusivity? That's from Eugenia Co. And then we have a question from Catherine Lynn asking, would you say Facebook is better suited for consumer industries or consumer products?
Yeah, okay, well, let's kind of, I think the two questions do go together. The first thing I would say is that for any business, businesses are made up of people. And so there's always an opportunity, even if you're selling something that's very B2B focused, to reach the right people who could be influencers for that. And probably everyone has the experience of getting off an airplane and walking through an airport and seeing lots of ads for a particular company that just sells B2B. I'm trying hard not to use specific examples, but I will. I landed in Hong Kong just last week, and there were big SAP ads all over the place. And, for my particular job, I'm not going to do much with SAP, but maybe some other people do. And that's really, really effective advertising because it's getting that brand in front of people who have to make decisions. So even for B2B, for enterprises that sell to other enterprises, Facebook is still, and social networking in general, is still an interesting platform because it gets ads in front of people. To the point around things that are a bit more sensitive, like private banking, and how do you actually go target people if you're dealing with information that can be sensitive, that is something that everyone has to be aware of. But at the end of the day, our advertising allows you to do pretty significant targeting. And if you're doing marketing, so I wouldn't suggest you go and use Facebook as a platform to run a private banking industry. But if you want to use it for a platform to reach certain individuals, it's actually quite good for that because you can target based on demographics, where they live, and some of their interests, and maybe you can tease out the people that you're really looking to reach.
Okay, great. Question on insights. How can insights help, this is from Ridi Chaufla, how can insights help a brand connect with consumers?
I think insights themselves, so the insights that we're showing, they do have data behind them, and they can help you make and build a very effective marketing campaign, both on and off Facebook, frankly. So to that degree, that's what they help you do. What we're not in the business of doing is going to someone and saying, we have all this data, you should run these types of ads. At the end of the day, if you think about the data that Facebook has, it's really the information that sits on your profile page. That's the data that's interesting. If you go to someone's profile page and see that they are interested in cricket, and they like to drink a certain carbonated beverage, and they like to drive a certain car, that's interesting information. But that's not secret or hidden. That's right there on someone's page. That's the content and context that makes for the most powerful advertising. That's not what you get on the Insights page. However, even if you have that context and content, you know that someone likes the examples I just gave, you still need to see, are you hitting the demographics that you want, and are people engaging with your page? And if they're not, then maybe you need to go buy some advertising, or you need to think about what types of content you're putting on your page to make it more robust. So Insights will help you identify those problems, but it won't give you specific data to go out and address them. That content exists on the pages today, on the profile pages today already.
Okay, very quickly, this is coming off of the Twitter. Sourav Keshan is asking if you can just speak a little bit more about the reach and talking about aspects of the Insights.
So reach, if you built a page, that page will have a certain number of fans. These are people who like that page. And that's the first metric you just described. Then the talking about it metric means that someone has engaged with that page over the last week. So for example, I may friend a page and they never go there again. And so I show up as a fan, I show up in the reach number, but I don't show up in the what's talking about it unless I go and visit that page at least once a week. And that's a real important metric because lots of people, friend lots of pages, but lots of people don't engage with pages. And I think that if you're a page owner, that really tells you a lot. People run marketing campaigns to go and drive fans. And one thing we've learned is that having a lot of fans doesn't necessarily mean you've been successful. You need to have a big fan base, but you also need to have people engaging and having discussions with that brand as well.
Okay, Eric, I'm afraid we're running out of time here. There have been many, many questions here that we haven't asked or answered. Many questions have been asked both on Twitter and over the webinar platform. They range everything from, how can we increase the followers on the Facebook page, talk about trends of users. But actually, Eric, I'd like to highlight to you one suggestion that came in, interesting one, just to show that the audience is giving back. Vishnu Valinti has an interesting suggestion for Facebook. They says that the interests section, when you're selecting ads, seems very much more segmented towards Western interests. Is there a way to make that more based on regional interests and maybe according to geography? So a thought for that functionality.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, and I appreciate that. I'll say I feel bad that there's so many people who had questions that didn't get them answered. And I think, coming into this webinar, I made an assumption around how much people knew about Facebook, and maybe I went a little bit too base level, so I apologize for that because we could have spent more time on questions. But honestly, everyone who asked a question, at least the ones that I heard here today, they were really good, insightful questions and show that people do understand where Facebook, but also social networking as a whole, is headed. And that gives me encouragement, both for the company, but also as an end user. Because, as I said at the beginning, I really do believe that both my life is better in a connected world, and it's better for businesses as well. And hopefully we can all participate in making that vision become a reality.
Yes, and I'd urge people to go through to the Twitter feed, FB Asia. There are a lot of interesting articles that have been shared about statistics on Facebook in Asia, ways brands are using different aspects of Facebook, so that's a very interesting thing. And do join us again when we have our next open social media training with the Wall Street Journal. So this is Tom Crampton from Hong Kong and Eric Johnson joining from Singapore, signing off of this Wall Street Journal Ogilvy GoToWebinar meeting from today. Thank you very much for joining, and we look forward to having you again next time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.